Welcome everyone, you lovely people. Today it's a product review again, and as you can probably tell, today is Craig & Rose's Artisan Rust Effect Paints. So originally designed for furniture and that kind of thing, like if you want to make a radiator look rusty without actually being rusty, this thing is exactly what you need. So I'm using it on miniature terrain. And it's quite a large tin. So it's 750, I believe, yes, milliliters. And this is the medium sized tin. So what you need when you have this stuff is the first stage and the second stage, this stuff, which is, as you can see, step 2 there. This is the Activator. So it's basically a high concentration of ferrous metals in a paint, and the second stage basically activates it and makes it incredibly rusty. So you can always seal it in afterwards with a varnish, but if you do that, it makes it look, I think it looks a little bit too matte. You know, rust is obviously slightly matte, and it's almost like slightly fuzzy, I guess you would call it. You know, it's got a bit of a texture to it. But when you seal it in with varnish, you kind of lose a bit of that. So it looks a little bit less realistic. But you know, sealing it in is always nice anyway. And I like to seal most of my my terrain pieces because they do get bashed around a little bit going to local clubs. But I must shout out, the only reason I found this stuff is a friend of mine called Just G Minis on Instagram. I'll put a link in below so you can check out his stuff. So he's a friend of mine, Graham Nye, local guy, and that rhymes. And he's just a thoroughly nice guy. Loves painting and always makes some great effects. And he basically said, Ross, check this out. You know, he's been using it on a few bases. He's had some great success with it. So yeah, he said, check it out. You know, see what you think. And I thought, well, this is great. You know, so I'll do a product review on it. And I'll run through the stages and show you how I personally use it. And you can put it on a fairly thin coat and it gives a reasonably rusty effect. Like if you're using a pigment, it's kind of that kind of texture. Or you can put it on really heavy and it's, you know, it's incredibly poppy. You know, it's quite orangey rather than the dark rust you would get when you have heavy flakes and things like that. But this stuff is fantastic. If you want to use it for like terrain, and that's what I'm going to show you on this video. So I'm just going to have a few pieces like this. So an orky looking barricade, going to make it look nice and rusty. Or if you want to use it, if you do like train layouts, train dioramas, things like that. If you want to have a scrapyard or something, this stuff is fantastic. What I wouldn't recommend it for is like streaks and weathering and things like that. This is for like big areas, like I do have gantries and walkways and things like that I'm going to apply it to. Stuff like that would look fantastic. So what I'm going to do is grab a handful of terrain. I'm going to rattle can prime it. And then we're going to go from there. So you don't need to see me using a rattle can on pieces of terrain. This is the kind of stuff I'm using, like I said. I'm just going to seal it off camera because everyone knows how to use a rattle can, I would imagine, and especially with a piece of terrain, I'm not going to be too fussy with it. It's not like I'm spraying a miniature. And then I'll show you what this stuff can do. So yes, please check out Just G Minis. Like I said, Graham's a really nice guy. You know, even if you're not interested in any of his commissions, things like that, he's just got some fantastic work. At the moment, he's doing some commission work with towel. And yeah, it looks fantastic. I mean, he paints towel himself, personally, anyway. And you know, him and me, we get on pretty well because he played Tyranids in Warhammer 40k, and I played Blood Angels. And then when he went Blood Angels, I went Tyranids. So we kind of swapped over, and we have played each other a few times in tournaments, things like that. And hopefully we can get him on the channel soon when this global pandemic's all over, and we can play some 40k together on the channel as well. But yeah, Just G Minis, check them out. So I'll spray these pieces up now, just seal them up with a primer, a cheapy old rattle can, so nothing expensive. I'm just going to use, I'll grab it now for you, just from a pound store or a dollar store, you know, something like that. and just seal these pieces, and then we'll start putting a couple of layers on this. So I'll do a few different examples. So I'll do a light one, a normal one, and maybe like a 2-coat, and see what you guys feel works best for you. Okay, so once you've primed it, whatever means you want to use, so I've obviously used the rattle can, which is fine, or you can use an airbrush primer, whatever primer you want to use, whatever you normally use. So to seal the plastic, no worries, and plus, it prevents, well not prevents, but reduces chipping. So it's always nice to prime, plus if you're working with anything resin, for example, paint may not take to it 100%. So that's what I used, some basic code primer. Now we want this thing to be rusty eventually, right? So I'm going to be spraying this a nice gunmetal by Vallejo here. But you can spray it whatever silvers you want to use, stuff like that. I'm only using silver because if this stuff rusts, we know it's a ferrous metal. So if you paint it brass, for example, brass doesn't rust in the same way. It does oxidize and gives off a greeny tinge, but for this video we're using just standard good old-fashioned rust. So by that I mean anything ferrous metals. So a metal that would be silver like this is perfectly fine. So I'm using this mainly because of speed. So I'm going to good old shake and put a little bit in my airbrush. Okay, adding a little drop of Glow Improver just for fun. Why not, eh? And giving it a bit of a swirl with a brush. So I'm checking it on paper first. Yep, it's looking pretty good. Always check your airbrush before you use it, because if it does spaff, I mean, on terrain it's not so important. But using it on a model, if it ever does spaff and you're doing something quite finicky, that would really mess up your day. So I might put 2 layers of this down, but I don't have to do a whole video on how to airbrush silver, because it's pretty basic. You could always use a good old-fashioned brush and regular old paint. That's totally fine. I'm just using an airbrush for ease of speed. So it's not really key to how this rust thing works. It's just my personal preference. You could just slap this rust completely all over without putting the silver down. So I could use it just on this. Put maybe like 2 real thick coats on it, so it's just mega bright rusty. But I'm going to do a few different variants in this video. So I'm going to do them all silver, but some of them I'm going to do like rust streaking, and other ones I'm pretty much going to douse the whole thing in the rust. And some of them I'm just going to sponge rust on in a few places, just to see a few different techniques, see what works out best. But I will spray all the pieces up using this silver, and we'll come back when the silver is dry. Okay, so when your silver is dry, it should look something a little bit like this. So what I like to do to give a little bit of definition, I guess, a little bit of a contrast to the silver itself, is use some good old Agrax Earthshade. Now this is totally up to you, but I do feel like the metal that would be exposed in between this rusted paint would be a bit too clean. So, I mean, you could always use a bit of null oil from GW, something like that. So then you have like a dark silver and then a light silver. But what I like to do is, here's one I've semi-made earlier, still drying, is to have a little bit of a rusted look to it. So I think Agrax is pretty good. So you got some good earthy tones in the recesses. Because not only is this metal dark in the recesses, I would imagine it wouldn't be very clean. So null oil looks great. It looks like, funny enough, some kind of oil possibly. And that's great. You could have like a dark silver and then a light silver, and that's fine. But for me personally, I would imagine this stuff is in some kind of wasteland. You know, it's out in the open. So rather than it's just a dark surface and a light surface, it's a rusted surface and then a less rusted surface. So no oil is great for things like, let's say this check plate here. If it was inside of a building and you want like a light source hitting it from one side to give it a bit of a shadow. But for this, I'd imagine it's quite a light area. It's out in the open, so maybe some kind of desert. And you have rust and grime and stuff like that. So I think null oil is good for cleaner metals or cleaner places. That's just my personal opinion. And you don't have to use this stage at all. I just don't want any metal that's exposed to be too clean. So I'm using just a generic brush, quite a large soft bristle brush. Obviously it's not fantastic because I mainly use this brush on terrain. I'm not going to use my Winsor & Newton's Series 7 on terrain. So I'm just literally just working it in all the recesses. Not being that careful, and put it on fairly heavy compared to what I would do to a regular miniature. Okay, I'm just going to keep working it. These recesses, just like so. I'm going to do it in all the pieces. I'm going to come back when that's all dry, and then we get started with the paint that this video is all about. Okay, so next, once the Agrax is dry, I would say if you want to make it look like it's a little bit less grimy and there's some raised edges that are a bit brighter, always dry brush a bit silver. So I've got a bit of GW's Lead Belcher on a dry brush, just making sure it's relatively dry. So good old makeup brush, and just pick up some of the raised areas. A bit more contrast, so the higher points will be a little bit lighter. So dry brushing, for those who don't know, is when you get a tiny bit of paint on your brush, and just work it in until, on a piece of tissue or something, until it's relatively, funny enough, dry. So you've just got the bare minimum on your brush. So when I went like that earlier on, you can just see tiny bits coming off. Nothing hardly at all. So it's supposed to pick up all the raised areas. So just like on that orc banner there, you see the edges are slightly brighter. I don't often do it on miniatures myself, purely because I think it leaves a bit of a texture behind. Looks a bit rough, not very smooth. But then again, if that's the effect you want, it's not all bad. So I'll just do that. It takes a couple of seconds to do it on each piece. Okay, so give it a 10 a third shake, and then cracking the lid. See what this stuff looks like. So earlier on I was talking about ferrous metals. For those who don't know, ferrous metals contain iron ore, and iron ore obviously rusts. So it's the colour we want. Well, it's interesting because I thought it was going to be a bit more of a reddish colour. Here we go. So I've got an old, fairly wide brush I used for DIY and things like that for years ago. And now I only use it on the big pieces of terrain. So with this stuff, going to make sure whatever you're painting is free from dust, because the paint obviously won't stick to it, and as clean as possible. So once again, no grime, things like that, because when that falls off, the paint will fall off. So I'll go a bit on my brush. I'm literally going to, on this piece, go pretty thick. On the next piece, go a little bit thin. I'm just going to work it in. Don't want to use a good brush, just in case it does kill brushes. And obviously, as you can tell, I am using newspaper. Get in all nooks and crannies. So one piece I'm going to do like mega thick. Another piece I'm going to do like one thin pass. Another piece I'm going to do thin pass when it dries, and do another thin pass over it. Yeah, I'm just going to work it in. So I'm going to leave it in a nice bit of sunlight. For once it's actually sunny in Cornwall. And see how it dries. Okay, so yeah, definitely not the colour I thought it was going to be. So very dark grey, nearly black. I'm just going to rub it into all the recesses like so, and do it on all the pieces. So the tin itself does actually say it dries within 12 hours. It's pretty good to touch now, so I'm going to give it a go. And that's been about 3 hours in direct sunlight, and it's dried out really, really nicely. So this one is the one that I've only put one coat on. So we'll see how it goes. So, I don't know if you need to, but I'm going to give the bottle of Activator a bit of a shake. And it's got a child safety cap on it. So I have to get an adult to help me. I mean, obviously I can work that out. So, I'm just going to apply this. So, this is only one coat, and the tin does say for a decent even coverage, apply 2 coats. But it does also say apply 2 coats of this Activator as well. So, this is 1 coat, and this is the first coat of the Activator. Stage 2, or step 2 as it says in the bottle. So I'm putting on fairly thick. I didn't put too much on the tyre because I will paint the tyre afterwards, because I can't imagine a tyre would be rusty. There we go. I put it on fairly thick. This is just the consistency of water, this stuff. You know, it's not like it's glue or anything. You can see it's pretty runny. So that's one side. Turn it over. I'll do the other side. So not extremely technical at all, but just, like I said, experimenting a bit. This is the one with 1 coat, and I have one I've sponged as well. So we'll see what comes out best. Like I said, the tin does state 2 coats. You can always add more, you don't have to go too nuts. But I didn't want this to be like fluorescent orange rust kind of look. Yeah, I want it all to be slightly different each. So put some of that on. Let's see what it's like when it dries out, shall we? Okay. There we go. Alright, let's have a look. So, like I said, it dried super fast, especially in the sunshine. I wasn't going to use a hairdryer or something to speed up the process, because I wasn't sure if it was chemical or whatever. Or air drying. So yeah, I used 2 stages of this, like it says on the bottle. And for these 4 pieces of train, you can see I used hardly anything, and same on the tin is still mega full. So yeah, I used a wash on one, so you can see in the recesses there, it's slightly rusty, like around some of the screws and rivets and things like that. So not masses, that's just the wash, so not what they stated on the tin, but I thought for hobby purposes, a rust might be good. Basically what I was trying to do is, if it looked good around a rivet, you know, individually, I thought it would be excellent. So like almost like a streaking, rusted, grimy kind of mark. It's not that specific, and you have to probably put a couple of coats on it, because as you can tell on a wash, it's only just giving you hints of rust. It's not giving you the full shebang, apart from where it's settled there. So, okay, it's giving you hints of rust. It looks dirty. It looks apocalyptic. Brilliant. Not bad. Not bad. Sponging. So I sponged it a bit on there. I did 2 layers this time around, which looks pretty good. Looks pretty good. So sponging works okay. not bad, especially for panels. It does kind of get in the recesses, but look at the effect on that. That really does look like rust. That's fantastic. Obviously I didn't put anything on the tyre, because a tyre's rubber, you know. Not quite that simple. And then I did one thin coat over the whole thing, make sure it's a fairly even coverage. I did accidentally get a bit on the tyre here, so I'll try to rub that off before I paint it. So you can tell on the first piece I started adding a bit of detail, so it didn't look quite so boring, like a bit of the plain wing was painted. I will do the same on this, you know, I will paint the tyre, paint these bulbs, so it's a bit of a contrast. You know, you've got the rusty griminess, and then you've got something bright, maybe some object source lighting possibly on there. But we're just talking about the rust today. So that's one coat. It goes on pretty well. I say one thin coat, but it looks thinner when it dries. So initially when you put it on thicker than you think, and it will shrink back. But that's a pretty even coverage. You know, once again, didn't do the tyre, makes sense, right? But yeah, it's looking pretty good. I'll get a second light on here, just so you can see what's truly going on in the details. So in the recesses you can see, that looks pretty cool. That looks brilliant. You know, like if you used riser rust, which is good, don't get me wrong, maybe a bit of typhus corrosion, you could achieve a very similar effect. But this looks so much more realistic, you know. With that application though, you can get into places where this possibly can't, and it's quicker. Whereas this, I know it states 12 hours between this and the second stage, but it will dry a lot faster in the sun. So I would say you can probably half that time on a summer's day, just leave it outside. But yeah, pretty chuffed with that. And this one here, the final piece, you can see I've splodged another bit on there because for some reason my OCD wants me to have a bit of rust there because it looks too plain on this side. I did dabble in there as well afterwards because I wouldn't mind something there. It looked a bit bland. But yeah, you can always add to it, and if you have like a dry old toothbrush or something, you could always, you know, rub it off afterwards as well. So if you think you got too much in one place, you know. But this one here was the random patterns. So I did like 2 coats there, so you can see the difference between, that's 1 coat, it's okay, it's fairly orangey. 2 coats, or if you like really heavily sponge it on, that's 2 coats there. And you can see on there, it's still drying, but yeah, a lovely rusted pattern. So that was 1 coat, and then this section was 2 coats. So it's going to take a bit to dry because obviously all the recesses in there, and obviously it pools a little bit because obviously this isn't thick at all, it's just like the consistency of water. So sitting in the recesses, things like that might take a little bit longer to dry. So yeah, so it's gone from nothing, 1 coat, 2 coats. So what I might do is, not specifically this piece of terrain, another piece of terrain. I kind of want to do one piece with like 2 real thick coats, so it's really rusty like this. It would probably work on something a bit better, like a barricade, than it would like power generators or something for 40k. Because I still want to do a glow effect on here later on. So they're still working, they're just incredibly rusted. Obviously the Mechanicum on Mars would not be happy with this, but I think it's a great product. I mean, in there looks fantastic. I did obviously 2 thick layers just in the corners there. But this is a brilliant product. Obviously I was messing around with different techniques. It does state on the can 2 coats, and then obviously 2 coats of this afterwards. But I was just messing around with different effects because I didn't just want one big rusted ball of a piece of terrain. I wanted, you know, different strokes, different patterns, things like that. And not every piece is going to be exactly the same. So I could have made the whole of this piece that kind of brightness, which would have been pretty good from one side of the table, but that's not how things rust. It generally pulls in recesses and things like that. So I want this still to be functional. Obviously it's not real. I know that, people, you know. But yeah, I still imagine this piece, fluff-wise, to kind of be real. So we'll do glowing effects on the reactor coils. So it's not going to be completely knackered, so it wouldn't be a big ball of rust. And that's not bad for one stage. I might get another barricade or two out of the attic, because I've got loads of terrain, and just really go to town and make something really popping and really orange. So when I see something like this, you know, I think that looks cool. I think that looks pretty good. You can see I've put another dab there because part of me wants something over that side again. I want it to be fairly even. I don't want it to be everywhere, I want it to be fairly even. So that's just me adding bits to it. You saw I've touched it a little bit. It rubs off really easy off your hands. You can wash your hands with like soapy water. It doesn't burn or anything. You know, it does say on the tin. I'm not crazy. Not just dipping my hand in things and thinking, oh, it doesn't burn. Yay! Like acid. Is this acid? Is this not acid? It actually does state on the tin. You know, you can wash it off with warm soapy water. And same with your brushes. It washes off super easy. I know this is an old knacker brush I was using, but yeah, no clumps in there at all. Not a problem. So it's a fantastic piece that you could use on any like post-apocalyptic terrain, stuff like that. I could do whole board segments in like a weekend. It's not going to be a problem. So I've done these 4 pieces. I'll just show you now how much of the tin I used. It goes a long, long way. So that is barely anything I used, which is fantastic. Alright, that piece there, the reactor piece, was the only bit that's had 2 coats on. I better squeeze that down properly before I drop the tin or something crazy. And I have to say, I went for a very large tin. Not because I like to get my money's worth and it goes a lot further, but I'm also very tight, and the small tin was already taken. And believe it or not, they do a 1.5 litre tin of that stuff as well. But that will go a long, long way. I do have 6 2x2 boards I want to cover with this stuff. And that could easily do that. With 2 coats, maybe 3 coats, really, really make it orangey. Really rusty like this maybe. So it just stands out. Really do rate this product, really do. And I am a bit reluctant, like I said at the beginning of the video, to use any varnishes because it, you know, you've got that texture with it, and it feels like rust, and it doesn't fall off. You know, you're going to have to really scrub it with something if you want it to come off. But I like it as it is. You know, I don't really want to have to seal it, and it kind of changes what it is. So thank you very much for watching. I hope this helps. There are other products out there, or other companies should I say, that make this product. I believe Dulux has their variant of it. I'm not sure about the price difference, but this tin is massive, and it's going to do me a long, long time. And obviously, you've got to pick up stage 2 with it, the liquid. That cost me about £30, which isn't the cheapest in the world. But you think how many pieces of terrain I'm going to rip through with that? I think it's pretty good cost, really, if you think about it. It's just me being tight. So, thank you for watching, guys. I really hope this helps, and like I said, I really rate this product. I think it's fantastic, and definitely looks more realistic. Not that I'm knocking Rise or Rust or anything, but I think this is more random, more chaotic, and more natural. Okay, hope you're doing well, guys. Remember to hobby safe.